This is Trillium Talk, our weekly look at what's been going on at Queen's Park with our team of reporters at the Trillium. Excited, as always, to have back with us Jessica Smith-Cross, our editor-in-chief at the Trillium. Welcome back, Jess. It's been a while. Great to see you.
Always good to see you too, Scott.
All right, let's get going here. It's been another crazy, busy week in Ontario politics. Let's start with the swearing-in of Premier Ford and his cabinet. And during his swearing-in speech, Ford took direct aim at U.S. President Donald Trump while quoting another U.S. president. What can you tell us?
Yeah, it was really interesting. You might think that for the swearing-in of your government in Ontario, you would talk about Ontario or talk to Ontarians. But at least for part of the speech, it certainly seemed like Premier Ford was talking to President Trump. He warned him about devastating the American Rust Belt with layoffs and plant shop closures. And then he went into quite a long couple of quotes from former President Ronald Reagan about trade. And I'm going to read one of them to you to sort of give the flavor. Imagine this not coming from me, but coming from Premier Ford at a very formal, solemn occasion. And he's quoting a radio address from Reagan here. We should beware of the demagogues who are ready to declare a trade war against our friends, weakening our economy, our national security, and the entire free world, all while cynically waving the American flag. So that's a quote that's from 1988 that actually feels quite relevant today. And Ford using it at his swearing in tells everybody that it's still what's top of his mind and top of his priority list today.
Yeah, certainly funny how that quote has come full circle. All right, speaking of cabinet, there was a shuffling of ministers and some big names, no less, getting moved around, including one who is said to believe that the sprinkling of holy water cleanses the Greenbelt soul of any sins and wrongdoings.
Yeah, something like that. So you're talking about Paul Calandra. So he is a big player in the Ford government. There was a time where he was doing everything for the Ford government. He was the government House leader and the Minister of Housing. And he's been the guy who the Premier has put in to put out fires. He's been given tough roles, and especially when they need attention. So we don't know exactly what to make of this shift. He's gone from the Minister of Housing to the Minister of Education. We could expect perhaps there are big things to come on that file, which would include the next round of negotiations with teachers' unions that can be a little contentious. And I should explain to the readers what you mean by the holy water. A little while back, after Paul Calandra had been in the housing ministry for a year, we published a feature story on him that spoke with a lot of the staffers who worked in the housing minister's office and ministry when he took over. And there was an anecdote that a lot of people had been heard going around the sort of ranks of staffers about him allegedly sprinkling what he at least said was holy water at some of the staffers who'd been in the former minister's office during the time of the events that were the Greenbelt scandal. That was taken at least by these staffers at a time to sort of illustrate his approach to things. He was the guy who was going to come in and cleanse the sins of the Greenbelt scandal past.
All right, next up, Etobicoke, cops and coyotes. What's all the howling about?
Yeah, this isn't our usual fare at the Trillium. We're pretty strictly focused on politics. But this was a kind of an interesting one. As at least Torontonians know, coyotes have become a big problem again in the city. There have been some really intense coyote-like attacks, especially in the West End. There's at least a theory or a belief that this comes because of the razing of Ontario Place to build the Therme Spa. Some people believe that the coyotes had lived there and then were displaced. I'm not sure that that's actually been proven. But what today's story was about coyotes around the Premier's house in Etobicoke in the West End of Toronto, more than a year before this recent rash of violent coyote behavior. So the Premier's protected by security detail. And when he's in Toronto, that includes officers with the Toronto Police Service. We had been doing, our reporter Charlie Pinkerton had been doing a story about something else that had occurred at the Premier's house, and then the FOI request, an information request for documents concerning the emails about his detail with the Toronto Police Service. And that caught up this coyote stuff in the process, which was officers talking about coyotes chasing other officers at least twice. There's one where the cop describes these as coyotes with no fear of humans, and the officer did everything short of shooting them to stop them. And the premier, I think personally, to his credit, told the cops not to patrol if the coyotes were on the loose. That was an issue, though, because their supervisor was like, you got to be out there. The premier's like, no, man, stand down. Don't get hurt by a wily coyote.
It's like a scene out of the Roadrunner. Okay, and finally, Jess, we just wrapped up a provincial election, and all signs now pointing to Prime Minister Mark Carney dissolving Parliament. In fact, that could happen today and calling a general election. What are you hearing, and what can we look forward to in terms of coverage across the Village Media Network?
Yeah, there's no rest for the wicked being people who write about politics for a living. That's right. We're heading into a federal election. It's going to be an interesting one. I think, as most listeners know, the Conservatives were high in the poll for a long time. It looked like they were a shoo-in. And then Prime Minister Justin Trudeau resigned. And then Mark Carney was elected Liberal leader and became Prime Minister. And the polling position has effectively tied with an edge to the Liberals by some of the people who track what the polls could mean in terms of seats. So it should be a close race. It should be an interesting one for us wicked people who love politics, and we'll be covering it. You'll see coverage on your local Village Media website. Some of that will come from our bureau in Ottawa, the Parliament Today team, and some of our local reporters will be pitching in as well on the national stuff and on all the things that happen in the communities where we have news outlets.
All right, looking forward to it. There's Jessica Smith-Cross, Editor-in-Chief at the Trillium. Thanks for this, Jess. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
You too, Scott.
All right, become a Trillium Insider today and never miss a minute of the action at Queen's Park. Sign up at thetrillium.ca for all of us at Village Media. Thanks for watching.